Awesome. We're live. I'm just going to make sure that we are actually live right now by checking my phone. Hey everyone, if you are able to see this stream, then let us know below. You might see the chat box. Let us know that you're here. This is designed to be an interactive conversation that we're going to start in a few moments, but just making sure that we are live right now. Mhm. Looks like we're live. Anyway, as people join in, I'm sure they will add their comments. Um, with that, let's start. What's up, Action Tribe? AJ here, host and founder of My Seven Chakras, my7chakras.com, the show where we help you calm your mind, relax your nervous system, and experience deep states of bliss. In today's episode, I hope to explore some really powerful topics such as the Putieko method, how breathwork can help reduce asthma and solve many other health related issues, the cause for and reason for hyperventilation, and the role that CO2 plays in our life. You are absolutely going to love this particular episode. So, if you like the work that we do and if you'd like to support our work, then firstly, make sure that you hit the subscribe button right now because that does something special to the algorithm and it helps more people come across our episode and our show. Right? So, hit the subscribe button, hit follow, and make sure that you are in the know about our newest episodes that we're going to release. With that being said, let's bring on our special guest for today, Sasha Yakovleva. Sasha is an expert on the Butieko breathing method and Russian healing arts, an advanced Butieko breathing specialist and co founder of the breathingcenter.com. Her work has been featured in the New York Times and many other publications, TV, and radio programs. She's also the author of the book Breathe to Heal, as well as the instructional DVDs and CDs and other educational programs. She was trained to teach the Butieko method by the founders of this method at Klinika Butieko in Moscow, and she is the most highly trained Butieko breathing practitioner in the English speaking world. Originally from Russia, she was trained in the Butieko Clinic in Moscow. Sasha is one of the few people in the world who received the authentic Butieko method in its complete form and is fully authorized to teach it. And she has taught this method to thousands of people around the globe, bringing them renewed health, energy, and joy. So, super excited to have you on. Welcome to our show.
Thank you very much, Ajay, and thank you for such a nice introduction. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And like we always start our episodes, I'm really curious to know what was your childhood like? Where were you born and brought up?
Born in Moscow, Russia. I actually used to work as a journalist because I was educated as a journalist. And then late in life, I'm in the United States. Yeah.
Mhm. That is amazing. And uh, what was it like growing up in your household?
This is an interesting question because, at least in the States, when people are in Russia, often assume that my childhood was very tough
Hmm.
and poverty and all. Actually, my story at all, my childhood was quite peaceful. I grew up in a family of journalists and writers. So it was a very creative world, a lot of actors and movie directors in our house having dinners. And I enjoyed it. I also traveled a lot as a child because my father was a journalist and he internationally. So I lived in different countries growing up. Yes.
Mhm. And did you have any breathing challenges or issues as a child?
No, I didn't. I actually, just like most people, I wasn't even thinking about my breathing. Most people are not, they know theoretically that they breathe.
Yeah.
Until they have some breathing difficulties, they're not really even aware of this function and
Hmm.
certainly not aware of its importance. I was just like many, many people, totally ignorant about my breathing, and I didn't see a connection between my breathing and my head.
Got it. And so,
Yeah.
where
And
did you come across Dr. Buteyka's method? How, what is that story like?
I'm glad you asked me that because I was about to mention
Right.
actually kind of a pre-Buteyko story, but that's how
Okay.
I crossed the Buteyko method for the first time. Because I lived in Moscow, I was publishing a holistic magazine. And at certain point that it became rather big national magazine and it was well known. At certain point, I received an article about Dr. Buteyka's work,
Mhm.
and it was written by a doctor. Wanted me to publish this article in my magazine. So I read the article, and the article stated that the breathing method invented or created can cure a lot of diseases, more than 100 widespread diseases. And I read it and I thought, you know, I could I could probably believe that the breathing method could, cure or could help one particular disease. More than a
Mhm.
hundred, I'm not going to do that. So I decided not to publish that article.
Mhm.
And then a few days later, Buteyko called me and meet with him and explain his method to me. He was saying that this method is incredibly important for everything, really. I refused because I just didn't think it was someone's health by changing breathing patterns. So that happened when I was in my 20s, living in Moscow. But then much later in life, maybe like in years or so when I was living in the United States, um, my husband and was convinced, and he was convinced that he was dying from asthma. And all of that happened very, very because he was healthy, he practiced karate, and he was really fit in general. But
Mhm.
he had asthma all his life, but it never bothered. And then he picked up some virus. Now I'm thinking maybe it was COVID because it was a really serious virus, but who knows?
Right.
And that made his asthma, and
Mhm.
within he became disabled. So doctors told us that we needed to accept this situation. Mom is an incurable disease. So he was supposed to be on medication for the rest of his life. And no one thought that he would live long. And so anyway, we started searching all over the world for some kind of solution because we tried everything in this country. Tried all kind of traditional um,
Mhm.
um, medical. We also tried all kind of techniques. And all of them were helpful to a certain degree, but they didn't really change the situation. So we started searching all over the world for a solution. And I'll keep it short because it's actually an exciting story. But
Hmm.
anyway, a friend of mine reminded me about Dr. Buteyko and
Hmm.
that his work is primarily known for asthma. So I called Mo, and at that time, Dr. Buteyko already passed, but I was connected to his wife, Lyudmila Buteyko,
Hmm.
and because everyone knows that asthma was an incurable disease, I wouldn't ask her, like, can you cure my husband's asthma? And the reason I talked to her, because my husband was American, so he didn't speak um,
Okay.
Russian. So I had to translate and organize everything for him. So
Yeah.
anyway, she kind of casually said, "Sure, asthma," and I didn't believe her. But because I was so desperate, and it was our last choice, we
Hmm.
flew to Moscow and took a course at the Buteyko Clinic in Moscow, and that totally changed my husband's situation. And was at that time became certified as Buteyko teachers, and I have been teaching this method since then. So this is a long answer to your short question.
Yeah, that's really, really, really inspiring for so many reasons. Firstly, sometimes in life you question the interactions or the experiences you have, right? And sometimes people come in your life and they go, but then you realize only later on that that encounter was very crucial to your going towards the Butieko method, even like 15 years down the line, right? Because you had that connection point in your mind. So that was so fascinating, almost like a synchronicity. But the other thing is that you knew Russian, and so you were able to be that translator because like you pointed out, sometimes when health deteriorates and you've tried so many different things, you're so desperate for a solution that you don't even mind traveling from USA to Russia as long as that person has some semblance of a way to help you gain that health. So that is really fascinating. So for listeners who are listening, or maybe people who are watching right now, who was Dr. Butiego? Maybe if you can provide a little glimpse into him, because his story is really fascinating, right? The numerous
Sure.
obstacles that he faced in his life. And I think people, his peers at one point, were ridiculing him and not taking him seriously, just like some other scientists experience when they come out with a new way of looking at things, or a new discovery or a new invention. So give us a glimpse into
Yeah,
his life.
absolutely. Buteyko was a Russian and Ukrainian physiologist, a very famous physiologist now.
Mhm.
A doctor. He first, when he was a young person, he decided to become a mechanic, car mechanic, logical mind, and he liked fixing things.
Mhm.
So he went to college to become a mechanic, but then the Second World War happened, and he participated in the Second World War, working as a mechanic, but for a medical section of the army.
Mhm.
And so, doing this work during the war, he saw a lot of wounded bodies, and he became really focused on it. And he thought, it's really strange, I can fix almost anything regarding the car, any kind of vehicle, but the human body, uh, machines. At that time, he thought that way to all. He
Mhm.
is able to help. So when the war was over, he decided to go back to school, but this time to become a medical doctor.
Mhm.
So he went to medical college, and he was extremely gifted and noticed for his talents. And everyone expected him to become, a medical star. He did, but in an unpredictable way. So all those years were very stressful for him, and his health actually deteriorated quite a bit. And after the college, he started working as a doctor in a hospital in Moscow downtown. But at that time, he was already very ill. He had a malignant form of blood pressure, hypertension, and was working in a kind of an elite hospital. All kind of treatments were available to him, but helped him. So doctors thought that, and he was convinced that 3 months to him. Night, it was his night shift. He was in hospital, and he was in the doctor's room through the window. It was dark outside. He was thinking about his own death himself. He was about people in general. Thinking, it's really strange that, like, if you look at animals are actually pretty healthy,
Hmm.
and then people receive so much, help, and yet people are outraged. I already said, as I already mentioned, he had a very logical trying out. It was like a puzzle for him. And
Hmm.
what I was thinking about it, um, a bright flash of light happened
Hmm.
outside. And somehow, I don't know, no one knows exactly what it was, but kind of light everything. And suddenly he saw his, in the window. He saw, and he saw his belly, and his belly was moving quite a lot, breathing, and he was actively breathing through his mouth. And at that time, because of his disease, he was almost in constant pain. And so at that moment, he had, because at that time, doctors knew that um, high blood pressure often comes with heavy breathing, right?
Hmm.
He wasn't surprised that he saw that he, for the first time, his heavy breathing, but the thought which he had was, what if, what if it's not the result of my disease, but the cause of my disease? And right away, he decided to close his mouth, he started breathing through his nose, and he reduced his air intake. So he was kind of looking at his belly at this point, make it move as little as possible. And when he did that, his pain became reduced significantly, almost non-existent, and he was just so astonished by that.
Hmm.
He thought he needed to try, the opposite, and then he started breathing really heavily, excessive through his mouth, and his pain came back right
Hmm.
away. So it was almost like an instant proof. And then because he was really a genius, and he had a very logical, he was able to see the whole chain of logical reactions, like what happens in the body when we breathe equally, and how it affects so many things, including blood pressure, and what happens when we reduce our air intake. And so he realized that reducing our could improve our health significantly and could various disorders. And
Hmm.
then he had to go his parents, and when he did that, he saw a man having a very bad asthma attack. So he was breathing like like that.
Mhm.
Was totally out of breath, and his lips were blue. Was about to faint, and Dr. Buteyko approached him and he said, "Close your mouth, right? Try to breathe through your nose. Try to relax and try to breathe as little as possible." And this man who was suffocating was like, "But doctor, you used to tell me, a completely different thing. You used to tell me that I should breathe deep, like that." But anyways, he
Mhm.
to Dr. Butek and changed his breathing, and his asthma attack stopped. Another proof that, the method, the concept works. Dr. Butek was very, very excited about it. And in the morning, when his supervisor came in the hospital, he shared his discovery. It was in 1952. And his supervisor, his medical and academic supervisor, clinical supervisor, told him right away, "Don't tell anyone about it if you want to be even alive,
Mhm.
because what you discovered is probably true, but it's against, any kind of traditional medical approach, and yourself, and you will put everyone in trouble because of that." So for a while, Dr. Buteyko kept it secret, but kept working on the proof by himself. And then
Mhm.
later, it was during the Second World War, the Soviet government decided to open a big laboratory in a city of academicians in Siberia to
Mhm.
examine breathing. And the reason they were going to do that was that they hoped to use it like for all kind of space related projects.
Mhm.
So they invited Dr. Butek to be the head of this laboratory, and at that time, unlimited resources were available for him to examine. So he had a whole team of scientists and all kind of professionals working for him. So they
Mhm.
did an incredible research as well as clinical work. But the problem was that the results of this work were against completely opposite compared to what traditional doctors thought about breathing.
Right.
And actually, it was even worse than that, because it was in tune with Eastern ideas about breathing, such as prana, for example.
Mhm.
So he was in a lot of trouble then, and his laboratory was destroyed, physically destroyed. Actually, he
Oh.
was, was for many many years at his work, and then after perestroika in 1987, he was able to open uh, his own clinic, the Buteyko Clinic in Moscow, and that's how his work continued.
Hmm. Very, very interesting. So many things to pick out over here. And what I also read about is that during the Cold War, there were so many developments and advances and researches that was happening on both sides, on the US side as well as on the Russian side, but
Mhm.
especially in Russia because it was top secret, plus it was documented in a different language. Not until maybe a few decades back was that actually shared, right, with the West. And like you pointed out, there was some really fascinating research that was being conducted for you know for the fighter pilots, but also for the, like you mentioned, for the space missions and things like that. So that is interesting. And what is also interesting is just to understand the human condition, that when maybe a scientist or somebody comes up with something new, a new discovery, all the peers, for some reason or the other, mainly because this new theory or this new idea will shatter the foundations of everything that we ever know about health and breathing, that they ridicule and put this person out of uh, out of a job or out of proper livelihood. And I think that's happening now also, right? Because people in general have a way of silencing somebody who speaks against the norm.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think a lot of our listeners are able to sort of put together the pieces to learn a bit more about Dr. Butieko. And could you talk to us a bit about the role that CO2 plays in our health? Because just like the story you mentioned, right, he discovered and he learned that maybe one of the challenge is not that we're getting less breath, but we're over breathing. And maybe we need to breathe less and breathe slowly. So,
Absolutely. So normally most people think about CO2, the gas we usually inhale, mostly and exhale, mostly carbon. So most people think about waste gas,
yeah.
but the nature doesn't waste anything.
Yeah.
So Dr. found out that it's actually of breathing. That's the outcome of it. It's the most precious thing regarding breathing, and a lot of connections between the breathing and Eastern knowledge, Eastern philosophies. I already
Mhm.
mentioned prana. So at some point, I was very interested to understand what is prana. And I
Mhm.
started reading, um, I was reading a book, old book written by an advanced yogi. It was a book from time ago. And um, prana is something to, but it's not breathing itself.
Mm.
It's not inhale, and it's not what we exhale. It's what after, right? And when you read this, you think, what is left, after? Most people don't understand that. But that's what Dr. Buteyko pointed out, that we always have a certain CO2 left in our, and this is our energy. He called it regulator of all bodily function. Discovered that due to our unnatural comfort based modern lifestyle, most people ventilate, most people breathe excessively. And
Mhm.
that means that they not only inhale excessively, but they also exhale excessively. And by doing so, they lose a lot of dioxide. And when they lose a lot of carbon dioxide, it kind of creates balance for the whole body. People start Some people start having breathing difficulties, and others develop different diseases.
Mm. Got it. That's very interesting that you were able to correlate prana and CO2. And it seems like CO2 might be at least part of, or maybe the chemical equivalent of the product of prana that is in our body that helps us facilitate all these important physiological functions. And didn't he once say also, Dr. Butieko, he said the deficiency of CO2 in the lungs must be present in order for allergic inflammation of the bronchial tubes to appear or to flare up. So, what did he mean by that?
Well, doctors say that the cause of asthma is unknown,
Mhm.
but asthma always comes when allergic inflammation of the lungs is present. So
Yeah.
it becomes like a cause asthma and other breathing difficulties, allergic inflammation of bronchial tubes. Well,
Mhm.
Dr. Buteyko found out that when the level of CO2 is on the norm or higher than, then there is no allergen of the lungs. It's just not present because the environment is not supportive of it.
Mhm.
And the opposite is true as well. And a person breathes excessively and there is not enough CO2, allergic inflammation of lungs developing, and that could cause asthma, COPD, so breathing difficulties.
Mhm. And is there any evidence, or did he ever write? Was Dr. Butieko ever inspired by yoga and pranayama, and all these other ancient sort of Indic texts and
Mhm.
practices?
He, I don't know whether he was inspired or no, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but
Hmm.
he definitely, can you hear my dogs barking outside?
The dogs are practicing some breath work.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Um, Tell me if it ask them to stop that.
Sure, sure, sure.
So, it's, yeah, I live in a very rural area, and
Oh,
we
okay.
often have coyotes around night. So
Right.
my dogs talk to
In
coyotes right
response.
now. In
Okay, I get it.
response, yeah.
That is so
Sorry
cool.
for that. Yeah. So I inspired by so this is like a whole separate conversation, which is very interesting.
Mhm,
Um, Pranayama, the goal of pranayama is to increase CO2. Before, pranayama given to a student
mhm,
individually by teacher. It was given only when the student was ready. In most cases,
mhm,
after that student master all asanas, and it was closely supervised by a guru, by an expert. And now it's totally different because and you go to a class and start house breathing with everyone. Because how we modern people breathe now,
mhm,
pranayama is actually could have a very positive effect on someone and very negative effect on someone. Because pranayama is an advanced technique,
mhm,
and as advanced technique, it's good for people who are strong and bad for people who are weak. So sometimes I say it's like running.
mhm,
If you are fit and if you are really strong, then running a marathon would. But if you are weak, if your legs are maybe in pain,
mhm,
kill yourself by running a marathon.
mhm,
Exactly the same with pranayama. Unfortunately, many modern people suffer from hyperventilation or
mhm,
excessive breathing without knowing it. So they start practicing pranayama, they actually start developing various health conditions and their breathing becomes weaker. So I often yoga teachers and yoga practitioners who are very, very unfortunately, breathing by doing those practices. However, the good news is that when they're breathing by doing Buteyka, do exactly the same practices, but now with a very strong effect.
got it. And before uh, our recording, we were chatting, and I mentioned to you that when I was a kid, I had a lot of wheezing, right? And not particularly asthma, but because I think there's a difference between the two. But I did have a lot of wheezing, and it would start at any point, unpredictable, totally, and we never knew what sort of um, stimulated it. But when it did happen, it was very uncontrollable. And so I remember as a kid using all those inhalers and spacers and always being in a state of anxiety for when, this breathing issue would start. And then over the years, it sort of stopped, and I don't have it right now. But could you talk to us about what is asthma? And based on what we know currently, what causes it, or what's the correlation there?
What is asthma? You said.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, AJ, I probably shouldn't say it. I hope that our interview help you to improve breathing, because
Yes.
you are still in a way that could trigger whether wheezing or
I'm still.
anxiety.
Oh my God! I gotta pay more attention.
Or other
Hold on.
diseases, other disorders, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. In um, asthma very often comes on with, course, both disorders are in our breathing. Those disorders don't exist if a person doesn't overbreathe.
Hmm.
But asthma is used in this method as a model, because if you understand how it works with asthma, it's easy to understand how it works with other diseases. So
Hmm.
everyone who has overbreathes to various degree. What
Hmm.
does it mean? Well, first of all, it means that most people who have asthma breathe through their mouth, especially if they're not on steroid medication. So you
Hmm.
had breathing as a child, and that tells me right away that you were breathing through your mouth a lot as a child. Maybe you were playing, with boys who were older, and it
Hmm.
was too difficult for you to breathe really heavily, breathing through your mouth. Maybe
Hmm.
you were breathing through your mouth sleeping. There are many
Yeah.
choices like that. So when when one breathes excessively,
Hmm.
or we could also hyperventilate through the nose, right?
Hmm.
So some people breathe through the nose, but it's also heavy and kind of noisy breathing.
Hmm.
Another, but the person, when we over exhale too much carbon dioxide, and the body is not able to produce, to generate enough, and then the level of carbon in the lungs starts going down. Well, when the level of CO2 in the lungs becomes zero, a person dies.
Hmm.
This is not to be taken. This is like a normal, regular medical fact, right?
Hmm.
So, in a human body, actually to heal itself, always wants to become healthier, always wants to maintain its homeostasis. So it
Hmm.
doesn't want to die. And it has something in this case. What it does, asthma as a reaction to overbreathing, is that it starts using various defense mechanisms against hyperventilation, making itself breathe less.
Hmm.
So how does it do? First of all, by creating a suffocation attack, like, an
Oh,
asthmatic,
okay.
like, I want to inhale, but I can't, right? Why? Because all air tubes in the body becomes constricted. So imagine like it's like all air tubes in the body, and they're really relaxed, and a lot of air is circulating through them, and a person is able to breathe easily. And then suddenly this mm, very constricted, but also the airway, you know,
Hmm.
the space in the diameters of airways becomes very narrow.
Hmm.
So it's difficult for a person, but that's how the starts increase its CO2 level.
Hmm.
Same, there is another symptom, asthma, wheezing, and coughing when airways become spasmodic. So again, imagine it's like this,
Right.
so less is going through the body. Or another very common defense mechanism of breathing is mucus,
Hmm.
right? So again, imagine air, there is no mucus there, like whether it's the nose or the throat or inside the lungs, doesn't matter. A lot of air goes through, right? But if inside they're covered by mucus, then the diameter of the airway becomes small,
Right.
right? So that's how the body forces it to breathe less in order to maintain a high level of CO2.
Hmm.
And doctors say that, all the asthma is a disease and is incurable. And in a way, I would agree with them because it's to overthink,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
So, and then, do it's just kind of um, suppresses the intelligence
Yeah.
body, right? So to follow that, Dr. Buteyko used a totally different approach. He said, cause of asthma is overbreathing. I
Hmm.
will train people to breathe less,
Hmm.
have willpower by using their breathing exercises. So it's instead of fighting with the intelligence of your body, operating with with your intelligence of your body, and you're like,
Okay.
oh, you see, yeah, okay, now I can decode what trying to tell me. Like the
Yeah.
case, like let's say be wheezing now, oh,
Hmm.
my body is telling me that I think I need to breathe less.
Hmm.
So I need to relax. Relaxation actually reduces our air consumption. And I to make a conscious effort to take in less air. And then,
Hmm.
the cause is gone and wheezing is gone together with it. And that's how people practice the Buteyko method. I to reduce or end symptoms, and many, many of them become medication free, not because they want to take anymore, but because there is no need for medication, which should be treated by doctors, and it is.
That's very, very true. Um, I remember when I was a kid, just getting all these different inhalers, and I'm sure that these steroids don't really do any good for you, although they do help you in the moment, maybe. But in the long run, I'm sure it's not good for you. Now, a few minutes back, you noticed maybe my breathing pattern, and you said that there can be some improvements. I, for the most part, try to breathe from my nose, and I'm keeping in mind to breathe slowly. So, what corrections should I make in order to, improve my breathing?
It's wonderful that you can effort to breathe through your nose and breathe slowly. You know, the Buteyko method is through the nose 100%. There are no exceptions from that.
Hmm.
And people who say, I breathe through my nose. And I say,
Yeah.
great. But do you inhale through your nose when you talk?
Oh, you
Right?
mean when you're, I get it. So, breathing through the nose even when you're talking.
In your nose,
Yeah.
even when
Okay.
you're talking. That's what I noticed. And times, as many people, and I
Yeah.
used to do the same,
Yeah.
to inhale like,
Hmm.
like that, and
Yeah.
it's supposed to be, quiet and hardly noticeable at all.
Oh, okay.
So that's
That
one
is
thing.
interesting. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and then another thing that um, many people think that they breathe. nose, but actually they breathe through the mouth at night.
And yes.
And that really that impacts their health very negatively. So I train people to breathe through the nose at night and when they exercise and when they talk. And as I said, there are no exceptions to it.
So what is one technique to ensure that I'm breathing through my nose even while I am talking? Because I know that when I'm talking, maybe I take a breathe in through my mouth only while I'm
Mhm.
talking. But obviously, so how do I ensure, or what do I keep in mind to ensure that I'm breathing through my nose even while I'm talking? Are there any suggestions or guidances?
Absolutely. So this is considered actually the most difficult part of the Buteyko method. Everything else is easier than that.
Yeah,
So it might be not that easy for you to apply it right away.
yeah,
However, I want to say, which I found very interesting, that many uh, kind of well-known politicians
yeah.
are now trained to breathe, to inhale only when they give a talk, a speech, very significant speech.
Right.
And the reason for it is that when you do that, first of all, you don't lose energy,
Yeah,
usually, and also you appear as a calmer person. And
yeah.
not only appear, but as I mentioned, like the way how we breathe
Hmm.
greatly affect our nervous system. So you are calmer if you're breathing through your nose. So what is the technique? Well, you can start with something as simple as counting numbers.
Hmm.
So you could just like inhale through your nose quietly and then start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on.
Yeah.
And then when you need to inhale, let's say it was on 5, you stop, you inhale, and then you continue 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and so on. And that's, very simple technique, breathing exercise to practice
Got it. So,
while talking.
so while you're counting, you're breathing in.
No, you're not
Okay.
counting, you're breathing in. You're inhaling through your nose, and then you simply counting numbers on exhalation.
Okay.
And when you feel that you're almost out of air and need to
Hmm.
inhale again, you stop.
Yeah.
You inhale through your nose again, and then you continue from where you stopped.
Okay. Got it. Got it. And I'm sure that listeners who are listening right now are able to try this out and maybe practice it, so that they are training themselves more and more to breathe through their nose as opposed to breathing from their mouth. Now, Sasha, one of the things that is part of the method is the hyperventilation provocation test, right? So, what is this test all about, and what are you
Yeah,
looking for here?
yeah, it's definitely part of the method. I don't my
Oh, you don't.
work with my
Okay.
students,
Okay.
but Buteyko used it quite a lot, especially if it would be difficult for a person to believe that it works.
Hmm.
Then he would say, especially people with asthma, but really all kind of diseases, he would say, okay, if you don't believe that breathing affects how you feel and your health,
Hmm.
then start breathing deliberately, excessively through your mouth, like something like that.
Yeah.
And so, if someone who has a predisposition to have asthma starts breathing like that, he or she will have breathing difficulties right away.
Yeah.
So, like people with wheezing, speaking about wheezing, provoke wheezing by doing that. And stop it as well by reducing your air intake and making your breathing quiet and invisible.
Hmm.
So, a big part of this method, which is really such a huge gift for everyone, but especially for people who have asthma,
Hmm.
is that it gives you control over your breathing.
Hmm.
And I saw so many asthmatics who were devastated because they feel like something is wrong with their bodies, but they don't
Hmm.
know what, they don't know how to fix it,
Right.
and they don't have any control over their breathing. So they feel like they can actually die any moment because of their breathing.
Yeah.
It's a very, very difficult thing to live with.
Hmm.
And this method helps to liberate people from that fear, because it first of all explains, the logic of the body, but also it helps people to gain control over their breathing and through their breathing over their symptoms.
Hmm.
And, over time to stop their breathing, their symptoms, but at the beginning at least, they learn how to reduce their symptoms by applying Bottega breathing techniques.
Interesting. I love how much science there is, right? And the ability to explain the functions that are happening inside the body. So, could you talk to us about homeostasis and the body's desire to go to any levels to maintain an optimum pH level, even
Mhm.
if it means making adjustments to the kidneys, or like you mentioned, to the air passages, or increasing mucus and all these different things? Could you give us an overview of how the body goes to any measures to maintain that pH balance in order to keep us alive and surviving?
You know, I would prefer not to answer this question because I'm not a doctor and it's a really
Okay.
complicated question. However, I'll say this.
Yeah.
So I have this book, with me,
Yeah.
and it sees that it's not only my name, but the names of two doctors here, Dr.
Yeah.
Butek and Dr. Novozhilov, and
Yeah.
another doctor who is not mentioned in this book, but my interview with him is in this book, is the American doctor, Dr. And all three of them talked about physiological reactions of the body and what happens in the body, we breathe in an abnormal way, which most modern people do, and how
Hmm.
it affects pH balance. It definitely affects pH balance in a negative way.
Absolutely. So we'll definitely add the link to the book, which I think is an amazing book, in the show notes so that people can, grab the book and read the interviews that you have posted there and what the doctors have to share
Thank you.
in the book. Um, uh, could you talk to us about the breath normalization method?
Normalization method. Yes, sometimes the book is called breathing normalization method
Okay.
because its goal is to normalize breathing patterns and
Hmm.
also the result of breathing patterns, which is level in the lungs.
Hmm.
And many people don't know that most modern people have a deficit of CO2 in
Hmm.
the lungs. So it's actually below the medical norm. And that this method, the breathing norm, allows to normalize that level. You mentioned Dr. Buteyko called it to the main regulator of all bodily functions. So when that level is normalized, people experience better health in
Hmm.
many areas, and all kind of ailments and disease go away. And I could actually talk about myself because I started practicing this method when I was I think 45 years old,
Yeah.
uh, 11 years ago, and 12 years ago. And at that time, I had a lot of health issues, but compared to my husband, None of them were severe. So I
Hmm.
thought it just like normal at that age.
Yeah.
So I had the allergies, I had sleep apnea, I had pain in my joints. I mean, so many issues. And all of them is a result of applying this. So it
Mm.
really affects everything. The way how we breathe affects everything. Do you
So
believe
what?
this?
Yeah, I mean, what you shared reminds me of the idea that health is not the absence of illness or disease. Health is going beyond that, right? Sometimes we're,
Right.
because of society, we're taught to believe that, I don't have illness, I don't have disease, I'm healthy. But what you're sort of implying is that, you go to zero, but then you go beyond that also. You're going be having maybe more energy, more vitality, and you're showing
Everything.
up as a different person in different areas of your life.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Put it this way that that's a comparison which Dr. Butek often used.
Right.
We can live without food.
Hmm.
We can survive without water for about a week. We can survive without air only for a few minutes.
Correct.
So, in those three substances, air or how we is really the most powerful. And Dr. compared breathing with nuclear energy.
Hmm.
And he said that when it's used correctly, it could create miracles. But if you're just playing, know how to use it, you can destroy your very easily.
That's so fascinating because even in the yogic texts, it's written that breath is like nuclear energy, like very powerful energy, especially the Kundalini.
Mhm.
If you use it well, then you can transmute that energy into something creative, and you can change your life. But if you don't know how to breathe, or if you don't mismatch that energy, then it can cause all sorts of issues in your life. Now, in the book, it's mentioned that asthma cannot be passed down from parent to offspring, and yet we often see that, for example, the father and both the son have a similar breathing condition, like in the case of my family, where my father also had wheezing and I also had wheezing,
Mhm.
right? uh, and it's also written that sometimes the child might have some defense mechanisms that lead to the symptoms, the asthma symptoms, breathing challenges. So as I look back in my life, what do you think might have happened? I mean, I was not part of any football group and I did not have to run faster than my peers. Uh, what have you noticed in the cases? Have you come across a lot of these cases where parent and offspring, both of them, have breathing
Mhm.
issues?
Yes, it's a known thing. It happens very often. It's, when three generations or more in a family
Mm,
who have breathing difficulties. So, unfortunately, many people think that, oh, because of my father or my mother had the same problem, I'm going
mhm,
to have it for life as well. And then the same thing is going to happen to my children. Well,
mhm.
it's not true. And the Buteyko method helps to stop this unfortunate chain. So, children usually inherit the same breathing patterns as their parents.
Right.
And, sometimes I say breathing patterns are contagious because it's like a certain rhythm, like a
Mhm.
melody, you could say. And so, if a little child is exposed all the time to the rhythm of breathing of his mother or father, you
Yeah.
know, and also their genetic setup, he would have a to breathe like both of his parents, one of his parents. And
Mhm.
so, if you breathe like your father did, of course, you would have wheezing as a reaction to
Right.
it. Absolutely. But it doesn't mean that you have to suffer from it for life and your children will suffer from it as well. You could simply stop this condition by changing your breathing patterns, by choosing to breathe. And this is a very interesting point,
Mhm.
because most people don't realize that we have a choice how to breathe.
Yeah.
Like you said, that, when you think through your nose and you breathe slowly,
Mhm.
perfect. You're making a very healthy choice.
Mm.
you know. So we have a choice how to breathe. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And what you mentioned sort of brought to my mind, sometimes as children we don't realize how much information we're taking on from our parents or the adults in our house, right? The way they react, the way they talk, the way they hold their body language. And most of that, because we are always looking for ways to survive. And so like you pointed out, maybe we translate or we adopt the breathing pattern, but then we can change it, we can correct it, and in doing so we are affecting the next few generations also, right? Because then they will take in the right breathing pattern that's good for their survival and thrival. So
Absolutely. It's like a diet. You know, let's say if your parents eat extremely unhealthy,
yeah,
inherit the same thing, but then you can change it, right? You have a choice. When you realize that, it's like, wow, I could be totally different. I could make health. And it's the same about breathing.
that is true. And before our recording you also mentioned that the Buteyko method has shown to alleviate the symptoms of a vast variety of diseases and illnesses, right? And you also pointed out over 100, um, and in each of them, I guess, correlated or aggravated by some level of hyperventilation. So how does a condition like hyperventilation slowly but surely lead to deterioration of a person's physical and emotional well-being? Or maybe if you can talk about what are some of the diseases or illnesses that have been known to be treated by the Buteyko method.
Well, the Buteyko method helps to restore overall health in general. So
Hmm.
I will my students that I'm not a doctor. I'm
Yeah.
not treating any specific diseases. I'm not going to cure any diseases. But what I can do, I can help a person to build his or her health. And as a
Hmm.
result, diseases become reduced and symptoms appear. So
Hmm.
that's how it works. It's kind of easy to explain how it works with asthma. You know, with anxiety, for example, it's a little bit different because the level of CO2 affects excitability of nerve cells,
Hmm.
and less CO2 in the lungs we have, more reactive our nerve cells become. And the opposite is true as well. So we all know that, like, not in good shape and tired and maybe just not feeling well, and someone says something
Oh yeah.
unpleasant, and you're like, oh, what did you say?
Yeah.
Action is like very strong, and even if you want to control it, you can't, because it
Hmm.
kind of happens on the level of the nerve cells. You can hide it, but action is still there. And in really good shape, and if the sick person says the same thing, and you just like walk out of it and keep doing your own stuff
Mm.
at all, right? So the same person, the same situation, totally different reaction. Why?
Hmm.
So Dr. Buteyko pointed out that it greatly depends on our CO2 level. And so by increasing the CO2 level through establishing healthier breathing patterns, people can reduce or stop anxiety. It also helps tremendously with high blood pressure, low blood pressure problems. Dr.
Hmm.
Buteyko cured his own disease by applying his method. And energy levels also, the way how we breathe greatly affect our energy level. So most people who chronically overbreathe
Hmm.
suffer from fatigue, to a certain degree. And
Hmm.
breathing healthier helps to overcome this um, disorder.
Got it. Got it. And In this method, in the Buteyko method, there's a lot of different types of measurement that is involved, right? And there are terms like the control pause, the positive maximum pause, and the negative maximum pause. So, could you speak to these terms and maybe give us a glimpse into how they are related to our breath?
Sure. And I would like to suggest that people visit the page on my website. My website is called breathingcenter.com, and the page is called Breathing Test. And it has videos explaining all these three types of measurements. And people also can submit their results and receive an evaluation of their breathing. But in determined that um, uh, of for how long we are able not to breathe comfortably uh, tells us about our level of CO2 and our overall health in general. So it also
Hmm.
depends whether the person is at the sea level or in the mountains. So it gets a little complicated, but generally speaking, if a person is health is um, at its optimal level, then a person should be to stop breathing and exhale for 60 seconds
Hmm.
level and
Hmm.
feel fine. So most people are comfortable, not actually are comfortable, not comfortable at all to stop breathing for a while.
Hmm.
This method, we use these techniques very gently, breath hold techniques. When you
Hmm.
gently inhale, exhale, and then you uh, and you stop breathing for a while.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Got
it's a
it.
good, it's a very good evaluate not only your breathing but your overall health.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, Action Tribe, if you're listening right now, your ability to tolerate a higher level of CO2 in your body by holding your breath is a general indicator of your overall cardiovascular health, right? So, the longer you're able to, and not forced, right? It should be
Not
very
forced.
gentle, but
Mm,
just seeing how long you can hold your breath, you know, indicates that you are a more healthy person overall.
that's true. That's very true.
Now, Sasha, I also wanted to mention because the last 2 years have been very, there's a lot of change that has happened, right, in people's lives all over the world, where a lot of people have experienced layoffs and changes in the nature of their job. So before, they were used to going to the workplace, meeting with people, having conversations and discussions, and now they're, for the most part, a lot of people have are stuck at home. But some people, for the first 3 months, thought that it was great. Oh, I work from home. But then they realized the challenges with working from home all the time. And then also, children are now, many of them are homeschooled, so the parents have this additional task of homeschooling the children. So what have you noticed? What is the impact that all of this has had on children, and are you noticing an increased asthmatic symptoms in children because of all this change, or no?
Well, Dr. Buteyko said if a child breathes through his or her mouth, this
Hmm.
child is unhealthy, regardless whether the child has symptoms or not.
Hmm.
Okay? So it's very important for parents to notice how their children breathe during the day when they are physically active and at night. And um, yes, COVID brought a lot of challenges, but regarding children, it's difficult to say, whether they're positive or negative or a mixture.
Hmm.
Because for some children, mm, being in school really encourages them to overbreathe. because sometimes it's stressful for them,
Yeah.
and stress encourages mouth breathing and over breathing, but also because of some physical activities in school, like already, mentioned that, like little boy playing soccer and trying to be as good as his peers, and maybe he can't,
Right.
then he's forced to breathe through his mouth. So for children like that, it's more relaxed, or could be more relaxed, to be home
Hmm.
and still have some physical activities outside, but
Right.
more natural, like it used to be when children would just play outside at their
Hmm.
own pace,
Yeah.
and it was, yeah. So it's, I wouldn't say that it's one effect, positive or negative, but yeah, everything, if affects breathing in general.
Yeah.
Breathing is the result of our lifestyle,
Hmm.
right? So it's like an accumulation, so everything we do in this life affects our breathing patterns and affect our CO2 level. So,
Hmm.
you just argued with your spouse, your CO2 level goes down, you're breathing
Yeah.
more. You just had a meditation session, your breathing patterns become less noticeable, lighter, and your CO2 level went up. So it's
Hmm.
just like that.
Very, very interesting. Are you a fan of using devices or gadgets to to measure the level of CO2 in our blood, and or do you believe in a more minimalist approach? Because you know I'm thinking in my mind as you were sharing this that maybe in the future, maybe 15, 20 years in the future, we might be so connected to our devices that when we are in an argument and when the CO2 level right goes below optimum, then beep 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 beep, there might be like something that indicates to us that we need to maybe keep in mind,
Yeah.
right, our health levels, and then change course or something like that.
Mhm. Well, in this concern about the level of CO2 in the blood,
Hmm.
which actually for some people could be even too high,
Yeah.
but we are concerned about CO2 level in the lungs.
In the lungs. Yeah.
And even for those people, CO2 level in the blood is too high, in the lungs it's usually too low.
Hmm.
So no, we don't use any device because we don't need them, and it's not a good idea to become dependent on the device. We always start, my work, when I train someone in the Boutique method, I always start by helping a person develop sensitivity to his or her breathing and become of it. And then a person is able to feel what's going on with his, whether the CO2 is going down or up, and correct it. So
Hmm.
that beep, beep, beep just starts happening in your brain
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. Okay.
outside your brain.
Got it. Got it. Have you also notice that people who have a history of issues with the heart, maybe like ischemic heart disease or something similar, have noticed benefits from correcting their breath and through the Buteyko method? Because my dad in particular has noticed some issues in the heart, and I'm thinking about actually visiting India, spending some time with him, and gradually helping him calm his breath, breathe less, and sort of documenting the whole process.
Right. So absolutely, the method helps with various heart conditions. And I'm also an example of it because just like you, my dad had heart issues, and I inherited them to a certain degree. Experience my was too fast, and I also had some pain in my chest, and I was able to stop it by my breathing. So
Hmm.
maybe, I should tell you one thing which is
Yeah.
applicable to everyone,
Hmm.
something helpful for everyone.
Yeah.
It's like, what are the first steps to improve our breathing?
Hmm.
So of course, the first step is to become aware of your breathing, just to feel your breathing. Then, then you need to think healthy breathing. But what is healthy breathing? What are its characteristics?
Hmm.
So the first is breathing through your nose only. If you breathe through your nose, it means that you are doing which is too much for your breathing.
Hmm.
Let's say someone is walking and the person feels like, oh, I cannot breathe. I'm going to breathe like this. Now, this person is making his breathing weaker.
Mm.
So instead of breathing through the mouth, this person needs to stop at least for a few seconds or a minute and relax and wait a little bit and then keep walking, breathing through the nose.
Hmm.
The nose is very important. Then, even if we breathe through the nose, we can hyperventilate. If you're breathing through your nose this way, you're still ventilating.
Yeah.
So, breathing at preferably silent. And then the next thing is that nothing in your body should indicate that you are breathing. So imagine, like, if your torso is naked and you are standing in front of a big mirror and you are looking at yourself, you should see nothing which indicates that you are breathing.
Yeah.
So some people breathe when they breathe, especially elderly people or people who have COPD, and they breathing by the movements of their shoulders. So they breathe like this. So it's very
Hmm.
important to stop that. Shoulders should not be of breathing.
Hmm.
Then people, when they breathe, especially people who have a tendency to, they
Hmm.
kind of breathe in a shallow way, and it's chest breathing. So the chest moves. It's like kind of
Hmm.
it's more difficult to demonstrate, but the chest moves a lot, right?
Yeah.
And then there is the third type, and when people breathe, the belly moves a lot. And at the beginning, it's fine when the belly moves some, but still
Hmm.
it shouldn't be moving a lot.
Hmm.
Eventually, even the belly should not move. So nothing is moving in your body. And of course, nothing you notice. Of course, the diaphragm always moves, but your breathing becomes so gentle that the diaphragm just moves a little bit and you cannot visually determine the movements of the diaphragm, right?
Well, thanks a lot
So
for that advice. Sorry, were you saying something?
I was going to say that, when you see your father, you could just start with a very simple thing. You could to put one hand on his chest, the other hand on his belly, breathe his nose, relax, and try to breathe that the chest does, and even the belly, it doesn't move or moves just a little bit.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And thanks a lot for, sharing all these different advice, anecdotes, stories, and really explaining to us the Buteyko method and the origins. And I'm sure all of our listeners are really fascinated as much as I am with what you shared. Now, before you go, tell us one thing that you're grateful for, and how can we find you online?
Well, thank you very much. My website is breathingcenter.com, and I work with students, my clients, all the time. I meet with them for free preliminary conversations via Zoom. And we also have a lot of educational video downloads and free audio downloads on the website. So yeah, information about the Buteyko method there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sasha, for coming on our show, talking to us about the Buteyko method and taking us one step closer to a human revolution.
Thank you very much. Is less.
Yes, I'm just going to stop it right now.